Allah, dear friends. Good day, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you may be. I'm sending my warm greetings from The Hague here in the Netherlands. And I'm honored to be your host on today's topic and to be a part of this beautiful 19-day series of sacred texts from the Bahá'í writings, inspirational stories about the early believers, and beautiful songs and prayers sung in different languages. Today is the 12th day of the fast, and there's something very special about this point in the journey. We're a bit over the halfway, and we've come far enough to feel its rhythm, its gentleness, its discipline. And yet we still have over a week left to deepen the experience. These days carry a certain light, a tenderness in the heart, and a sense that we're moving through a truly sacred period. So today I wanted to reflect with you on something that feels very connected to the spirit of the fast, which is teaching the faith through who we are. Inner transformation as the first act of service. During the Bahá'í fast, we're invited to turn inward. We step away for a time from physical comfort and routine, and we become more aware of our thoughts, our habits, our reactions. Hunger and thirst have a way of revealing us to ourselves. They show us that we're impatient, where we cling to control, where our egos quietly assert themselves. And in that honest space, the fast gently reminds us that spiritual growth is not a side project. It's central to our lives. This inward work is not separate for service to humanity or from teaching the faith. In fact, the Bahá'í teaching suggests something both simple and demanding. That the most powerful form of teaching begins with becoming who we are. When we think about sharing the faith, we often think about words like, what should I say? How do I explain this teaching clearly? How do I respond to questions or doubts? But the fast invites us to consider a deeper question. What do people experience when they are with me? Baha'u'lláh expresses this truth with great clarity. Let deeds, not words, be your adorning. Before anyone hears our explanations, they encounter our character. Before they read a prayer or a book, they observe how we listen, how we respond, how we treat others, especially when it's inconvenient or difficult. During the fast, when our physical strength is reduced, something else has the opportunity to come forward. Our sincerity, our humility, our reliance on God rather than on ourselves. And this inner work directly affects how we see others. When we are attached to outcomes, we may become impatient. When we're eager to convince, we may stop listening. But when we're focused on refining our own hearts, we begin to see people differently. We stop seeing others as ready or not ready, interested or closed, responsive or distant. Instead, we begin to see them as souls on a journey, each with their own timing, struggles, and discoveries, just as we have our own. Teaching them becomes less about persuasion and more about accompaniment, less about directing and more about walking beside. A powerful example of this kind of teaching comes from the life of Baha'u'lláh during his imprisonment in Akka. When Baha'u'lláh and his family were exiled there, the conditions were severe. The authorities had portrayed him as a dangerous figure, and the people of the city were warned to avoid him completely. Among those influenced by these warnings were the guards and jailers assigned to watch him. At first, they approached their duty with suspicion and fear. But over time, something began to change. Not because Baha'u'lláh tried to convince them or anything, and not because he defended himself with words. Day after day, they witnessed his conduct, his courtesy, even as a prisoner, his patience in the face of injustice, his concern for others, even while enduring hardship himself. Gradually, fear gave way to respect. Suspicion gave way to reverence. Those assigned to guard him began to see that they were in the presence of an extraordinary soul, not because of arguments or explanations, but because of who he was. Nothing was preached, nothing was demanded, yet hearts were transformed. This story reminds us that inner transformation is itself a form of teaching. Truth is not only spoken, it is felt. And character can reach places that words never can. For us, especially during the fast, this example is both comforting and challenging. It tells us that we do not need perfect eloquence or deep knowledge to serve the cause. What is asked of us, first, is sincerity, patience, and integrity. Baha'u'lláh reminds us, the betterment of the world can be accomplished through pure and goodly deeds, through commendable and seemly conduct. The fast gives us a sacred space to work on those deeds and that conduct, not in theory, but in daily life. It's in our tone of voice, in our own capacity to listen, in our ability to remain kind when there is no visible response. When our lives reflect humility, others feel respected. When our actions reflect consistency, others feel trust. And when our hearts are turned toward God, others sense hope, even if they cannot explain why. Teaching them becomes natural, quiet, almost invisible, but deeply effective. As we continue through these days of fasting and prayer, perhaps we can ask ourselves not, how can I convince others? But rather, how can I become someone through whom truth is felt? If we allow the fast to shape our character, even a little, to soften us, to purify our intentions, to deepen our love, then we are already serving the world. Because sometimes the most powerful invitation to faith is simply a life that reflects light. And now, dear friends, a beautiful inspirational story about Howard MacNutt, which is a very good example of inner transformation as the first act of service.
Howard MacNutt was the kind of man people did not forget, not because he sought attention, but because his sincerity lingered. Born in Philadelphia in 1859 into a cultured and respectable family, MacNutt trained himself early in precision and discipline. As a young man, he worked as a court stenographer, a profession demanding clarity, exactness, and faithfulness to the spoken word. Later in life, he also took up the game of cricket, eventually representing the United States in international competition. In 1889, he married Mary Stokes, a sensitive and intelligent woman who would become his lifelong companion in both faith and service. The couple moved to New York, where in the late 1890s, they joined a circle of spiritual seekers, united by a hunger for truth. It was there that Howard first heard of a new message spreading from the East, a faith proclaiming the oneness of humanity. He studied carefully, questioned deeply, and finally embraced the Baha'i faith. MacNutt soon became a tireless advocate of unity. He spoke publicly and taught widely.
We recognize not merely the individual, but the essential substance that resonates broadly across all people.
He became a familiar presence at Green Acre, one of the earliest centers of Baha'i activity in the United States. His home with Mary became a gathering place for seekers and believers alike, a space marked by warmth, thoughtfulness, and spiritual seriousness. When the New York Baha'is elected their first Board of Council, the forerunner of the local spiritual assembly, on the 7th of December 1900, Howard MacNutt was chosen as one of its 9 members. He would serve on that body intermittently for more than a decade, helping to shape the administrative and spiritual foundations of the community. In December 1904, 9 American Baha'is traveled on pilgrimage to the Holy Land aboard the RMS Majestic, accompanying Abul Fazl on his return to Syrian Palestine. Among them were Howard and Mary MacNutt. During that pilgrimage, they attended a feast hosted by Abdu'l-Baha, who encouraged the believers to gather regularly in unity and consultation. Upon their return, and after consultation with the New York Board of Council, such feasts began to be held consistently in America, with the endorsement of Abdu'l-Baha. After the pilgrimage, both Howard and Mary began to speak publicly with greater confidence.
We stand at the precipice of a new era, one that demands not just our attention, but our collective action.
Howard was also invited to address gatherings within the Black community of Washington, D.C., speaking before leading African American institutions, an expression of his deep commitment to racial unity. During this period, however, a crisis of the covenant arose among the New York Baha'is. MacNutt struggled to fully understand the station of Abdu'l-Baha and hesitated to obey the instruction to sever all contact with covenant breakers. After months of correspondence, reflection, and repentance, he came to clarity. Abdu'l-Baha accepted him fully, recognizing him once again as a faithful believer. In 1912, when Abdu'l-Baha visited North America, Howard MacNutt met him upon his arrival from the RMS Cedric. The MacNutts undertook the demanding task of attending many of his public addresses and carefully taking notes, which later formed the basis of publications in Star of the West and ultimately in the promulgation of universal peace. They also hosted the filming and recording of Abdu'l-Baha in Brooklyn, in a racially integrated setting, a bold and prophetic act at a time of entrenched segregation. That same year, Howard attended the wedding of Louis Gregory and Louise Matthews, the first interracial Baha'i marriage in the United States. Howard continued to serve the cause tirelessly. He chaired the closing session of the first Race Amity Convention in Washington, D.C. in May 1921. When the promulgation of universal peace was published in 1922, his preface offered one of the clearest and most important early statements on the station of Abdu'l-Baha. As Mary's health declined during New York winters, the couple began spending more time in Florida, particularly Miami, where Howard found new opportunities to teach. From there, he traveled extensively across the United States. In 1925 alone, he journeyed some 25,000 miles and visited more than 100 Baha'i communities. In Miami, he devoted special effort to building bonds of friendship with the Black community and teaching the faith among them.
Very kind indeed.
Shortly before a catastrophic hurricane devastated Miami, tragedy struck in quick succession. On the 26th of November, 1926, Mary MacNutt died after a fall at home. Just weeks later, on the 23rd of December, Howard was struck by a motorcycle while walking to a Baha'i meeting in a Black neighborhood of Miami. He succumbed to internal injuries 3 days later, on the 26th of December, 1926. Looking back on the life of Howard MacNutt, one sees a man who transformed every gift he possessed: the precision of his pen, the discipline of his character, and the gentleness of his heart into service. Howard MacNutt left this world as he had lived within it, on his way to a gathering of souls. with the flame of service still burning in his heart. And today, in the pages he helped preserve, and in the communities he helped raise into being, his voice continues to speak, calm, clear, and steadfast, just as it once accompanied the footsteps of the Master across the soil of the West.
And now, dear friends, a song by James Mohajer, "Oh, that I could travel," a sentence sung from Abdul Bahá's tablet of the Divine Plan. I wish you all a blessed fast, with loving regards.